Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Natasha from Fusion Pharma, and I'm going to be talking to you today about AI and how AI can, regulatory intelligence and AI, and how AI can really turn regulatory intelligence into your competitive advantage. Now, we're going to start off with a little activity for you. So if you use the QR codes that you can see on the screen on your phone, that will give you some options on your phone to enter in the first word that comes to mind when you think about regulatory intelligence today. Important, nice. Hour, I love that. Strategy, yeah, varied. The future. Love it. Slow, interesting. Critical, yeah, brilliant. So this app that's come up on your phone, or the ability to do this, if you keep that there, we've got a few more activities for you to do later in this presentation. So let's just have a look at that. I'm just going to, oh no, that won't go. Okay. So let's move on. So today I'm going to be talking to you about what regulatory intelligence is and how to recognise its strategic value. Also, a bit about a framework that we can apply to regulatory intelligence, and then how we can leverage AI to enhance regulatory intelligence. So I want you to imagine this. It's Friday afternoon. It's the 16th of January, 2026. And you've been working on a variation package for a couple of weeks, and it's urgent. It's critical. It's a change that must be approved urgently to allow continued business supply. You created the package and it's ready to submit. And then your colleague says, oh, did you check the new variations guideline to check that you've got the right classification and the right document requirements? Because that came into force yesterday. And you think, oh, so you go and find this new variation guideline. And you have a look and you realise, oh, I need more data in my variation package. And you think, oh, there's going to be delays. How am I going to explain this? And then you think, well, why didn't I know about this? And that is what regulatory intelligence is all about. So here is a definition of regulatory intelligence. It's the systematic process of monitoring, gathering and analysing regulatory information to ensure compliance with evolving requirements. So think of it like a savvy travel planner. It's constantly checking the timetables, the roadworks, the visa rules, and then it maps the safest route for your trip, your submission, and arrives on time without any fines. That is the goal of regulatory intelligence. So why does it matter? Well, regulatory intelligence matters because it informs decision making. So you can make strategic decisions based on the information available to you. It helps with product development so that you can identify the requirements early. It ensures compliance. If you'd known about this variation guideline beforehand, you'd have known that you'd needed this data and you would have met the compliance requirements for this submission. It provides proactive strategy so you can anticipate the changes, and it can actually influence the company's direction and positions on new regulations. So with regulatory intelligence, you're not just keeping up, you can influence the company agenda internally and externally so that companies can make smarter, more informed decisions. And this adds value to the business. So there's a human side to regulatory intelligence as well when we look at strategy and the value and the influence. So to quote one of the RAPs is the US version of TOPRA, one of their books about regulatory intelligence. So action defines effective regulatory intelligence, and without it, intelligence remains theoretical, meaning it takes us in our roles to create this action. So it can really then be used to influence company strategy. And we need to use regulatory intelligence to address the misconceptions of regulatory intelligence. So the leadership teams can still misunderstand our role in regulatory intelligence and the potential that is there. You can try and think about regulatory intelligence as a trusted brand, and it needs to be the go-to source for your clarity for regulatory information. But there also needs to be clear boundaries for regulatory intelligence. So regulatory intelligence professionals monitor and inform, but it's the subject matter experts that do the evaluation and make those final decisions. So who is responsible for regulatory intelligence? Well, it is different in different organisations. So in large pharma, you may have dedicated regulatory intelligence departments, and smaller organisations, it might be a single person or it might be shared across a few different roles. But regardless of the size, don't rely on one individual or team. Everyone has a role in awareness, and you are the specialist in what you're working on. And so you need to keep up on any updates that maybe impact your role. So stay informed. You also need to define the scope. If you're in a regulatory intelligence role, what does this function? What is it expected to cover? There may be different regions that this intelligence is expected to cover, or maybe even the scope of the news. Is it just regulatory news or is it pharmaceutical law? There's a bit of a framework that we can apply to regulatory intelligence. So this is made up of people, and they have the specialist skills and they are developing and learning, and there's cross-functional collaboration within those teams. There's the technology which enables the regulatory intelligence, such as email, but also regulatory intelligence platforms and databases. There may be internal systems, even AI and automation. There is then process to regulatory intelligence. So this is what ensures the consistency. This is the workflow that you follow, and this can standardize communication and give you the documentation for any audit trails that you need. So in terms of the people, regulatory intelligence is collaborative. It's a team sport. And there are all these different roles in regulatory affairs, and each team is vital for its role in gathering and evaluating intelligence. Understanding regulatory requirements is a shared responsibility, and collaboration leads to more informed decision making and better to strategic actions. So you have Collaboration meaning better decisions, better timing, and better outcomes. So if we look at the process behind regulatory intelligence, it flows. So we start with monitoring the environment, then we analyse and communicate, then any relevant changes are evaluated, and then there may be action taken from changes that arise. So if we look at these steps in more detail, so to monitor the environment, we are scanning intelligence sources. So the requirements of this is initially you need to define your geographic regions that you're looking at, define the relevant topics, any therapeutic areas that you're focusing on, and define the frequency that you're monitoring, and also define the sources where you're getting your intelligence from. Technology behind this is maybe regulatory information on portals, internal databases, commercial platforms, automated alerts, regulatory authorities. So when I talk about these sources, another point to make here is just when you're looking at these sources, do periodically review the sources that you're getting your information from to check that you're getting the right signals and that they are relevant. So when I talk about these intelligence sources, so where you are monitoring for regulatory intelligence, so you need to draw this information from a diverse selection of sources. So there's the regulatory authorities such as the MHRA, FDA, EMA. And actually, when we look at the regulatory authorities, they're not just putting information out there on their websites. They're also using blogs, they're using LinkedIn, they do lots of webinars, they're putting them on YouTube. So they're trying to reach us in lots of different formats. So you need to try and be aware of how and where they are doing this, so you capture the information that's relevant. There are commercial platforms. So these, when I talk about these are really big databases that are now powered by AI that can do a lot of the intelligence monitoring for you. So such as Cortellis, Sightline, there's Infodesk, and Dr. Evidence. Then there are industry publications such as Topra Rapporteur, RAPS, the American version, there's journals, there's different newsletters, and then professional networks such as ABPI, or Topra has a SPIN, a regulatory intelligence network. RAPS again sends out lots of information, and there's EMIG as well. And also consultancies such as Fusion Pharma can be a really useful source of information. I've put at the bottom here, you can sign up for our regulatory intelligence bulletin that we send out. But also do link to experts on LinkedIn or Blue Sky if you use that. Then obviously learning and development, you can attend conferences, training and workshops and webinars such as this to get your information. And you may even have internal resources such as company databases or intelligence within your company. So the next step is analyse and communicate. So this is where the regulatory intelligence role is reviewing the relevant information that's been pulled up by the sources and identifying these relevant topics. And then these roles communicate this intelligence, and this may be updated on internal systems. So the technology here is maybe email lists and newsletters, internal databases, and maybe AI tools at this stage. Now, I'm just going to talk about the communication side here, because you've got to make sure that when this information is being sent out, it's reaching the right people, but also in the right format at the right time. So in terms of communication to leadership teams, This communication needs to be concise and summarised so that the strategic implications and key decisions can be communicated clearly, and so that they fully understand the consequences of any of these changes that have been picked up. Then, if we're looking at the communication to functional teams or departments, this can be more comprehensive, but again, make it relevant so that it's easy for these teams to digest. It can have detailed information and requirements and timelines, but it still needs to be clear. So in terms of communicating, try and be collaborative, build engagement, and maybe hold collaborative information sessions so that these changes can be discussed and problem solving can be looked at. Maybe this could be in regional or team meetings or internal workshops and training. But if you are doing email information and sending out by that, try to maybe consider alternative approaches, because in large corporations, anyway, distribution lists can be quite complex to manage. Is there a system in your company you could use so that people can subscribe to, so that they can be empowered to, join up if they want to, and they can self-select what content they receive? Some companies use Teams channels to be able to share information, and this can be organised and searchable. So this is quite a nice way to share information. And like I discussed before, also some discussion groups, so you can find out how people do want this communication to come to them and in what format. So then we're at the next step where we're evaluating the change. So this is now with the teams that work in these areas that are now evaluating the impact on their roles. So the process here is assessing the impact on regulatory strategy and submissions, on dossiers or labelling. It may be assessing plans and portfolios within the business, and looking at policies and procedure changes or ways of working. So technology here is document management, maybe QMS for managing change controls, and maybe AI to use to review the impact. So I've talked about communication before, and now I'm talking about receiving this communication, because it can be really overwhelming to receive all of this regulatory intelligence information. So when you're receiving this information, look at a bit more of a structured approach of how you deal with it, and try to focus on what matters most. You can try and triage what comes through for efficiency. So identify those immediate changes and assess any deadlines for implementation, and try and prioritise any urgent regulatory updates. And then create a plan for any long-term changes that may be in forecast. So then when you've received these changes, also you need to think about the context. Do you actually understand the process that this change is impacting, so that you can do an accurate evaluation and determine the scope of this impact? So is this impacting you in your role? Is it your department or your team, or is this company-wide? And then have a look, is this a draft guidance maybe? And if it is, could you get involved in the consultation? Or is it final? Do you need to update an SOP immediately? And you can use AI for specific impact assessments, so there could be tools that you could use to help you. So the next step in the process now is action. So you've realised that we've done the evaluation, and yes, this change that's coming is going to impact us and we need to do something. So the process part here is you're going to need to implement some changes. It may be that someone needs to raise a change control, or you may need to submit some variations. There may be a regulatory strategy that needs to be updated, You may need to create new policies or SOPs or revise them or respond to consultations. There may be education and training that you may need to roll out, and you will need to maintain regulatory intelligence tracking, and I will talk about this shortly. So again, there is technology that underpins all of these steps. So when I talk about regulatory intelligence tracking, what I'm talking about here is recording the details of this impact assessment. So you're recording that you've reviewed and assessed this change, and then what the output was of that assessment. You should record the roles, who's responsible for managing this change, who is impacted, and maybe appointing a SME, subject matter expert. And then recording, okay, what are the next steps? Define those and record that. Is there an SOP that needs to be created or updated? Does a whole project need to be started? Are some submissions impacted? So this tracking means that you must then monitor and confirm this implementation to ensure it's successful. And the reason for doing this is for potential audits by the health authorities, so that you can show that you've got effective regulatory intelligence tracking. So you've got evidence of your impact assessment and that you've recorded the outcomes and any actions that have come from that. And have you got a regulatory intelligence SOP that you can show the authorities how you monitor and evaluate and implement any changes? So I'm just going to have a little drink. I'm just going to talk about a real life situation. So some of you may be very well familiar with the nitrosamine event in 2018. But if you're not, I will just briefly cover what happened. Is that in 2018, an impurity was detected in valsartan, which is I think it's a blood pressure drug. And the manufacturer identified this, and it was due to a change in API processes. And the nitrosamines are mutagenic carcinogens. So the regulatory authorities then were made aware of this, and there were global recalls, safety alerts, and regulatory reviews. What happened after the authorities started reviewing this is that they said, right, all companies that make valsartan have got to review their products. But then they realised they needed to look at all sartan products. Then the scope was extended to include ranitidine. Then it was extended further to include all human medicines. Then the FDA and the EMA developed guidances for this, and then going forwards, we now have a continuous monitoring obligation to test for these impurities. So regulatory intelligence in this situation meant that these companies were able to deal with this situation if they had a good regulatory intelligence process in place. So they had fewer surprises and faster reactions. And that's what has kept them ahead when dealing with this type of crisis. So these organisations were able to monitor all these evolving guidelines across the different markets, and they were able to understand the different timelines, prepare specific submissions to deal with the different agencies and anticipate any authority focus. So they were able to navigate this crisis effectively. So there's benefits of having a really robust regulatory intelligence process in these companies means that you can respond faster, and there's less business disruption, and also better relationships with the health authorities. So in regulatory intelligence currently, There is maybe some misunderstanding, and it's not prioritized. It can be fragmented. There may not be specific regulatory intelligence roles. The technology being used may be outdated, or maybe being used manual processes, which may be unsustainable in our complex regulatory world. So it's really important that companies understand this value of good regulatory intelligence. Now, just in general, I'm now talking about AI because this can really transform regulatory intelligence, and it's transforming pharmaceuticals, companies, and the world. It's accelerating the drug discovery process, so drugs are being identified much more quickly than previously. Clinical trials efficiency is being improved. Medical writing for submissions is being powered by AI, and things like clinical study reports can be drafted in 10 minutes rather than a draft for 15 weeks. Lots of different documents that can be used. So what I want to quickly ask you all, I'm just going to put the QR code back up. Or there it is. So I'll just pop it up if you haven't still got it on your phone. But it's got some question here. How much do you currently use AI tools in your role? Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's occasional, pretty much. All right, thank you. I'm going to crack on. So that's interesting to see. So as you may know, the pharmaceutical health authorities are also starting to embrace AI. So the MHRA is using it to accelerate clinical trial approvals and for medical devices. The FDA has multiple tools that they use to provide efficiencies, and the EMA is also using AI. They've actually produced a reflection paper. You can see a link at the bottom for use of AI in the medicinal product life cycle. So they are using it. So we need to keep up. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about some AI fundamentals, because as you can see, we're all learning and it's all new to a lot of us and it feels a bit scary. So I just wanted to talk about some basics. So we've got to understand AI's role. It is our assistant. It's not our replacement. It will enhance our expertise rather than replace it. So what it's really good at is drafting and outlining documents. You can brainstorm with it. You can go back and forth with ideas. Yes, it can analyze large data sets. You can compose communications. It can listen to this meeting and put it into a summary. It can convert notes into slides. Creative problem solving. It can tell you what to make for dinner tonight out of the contents of your fridge. But it can't replace us humans. It cannot replace our professional judgment, making critical regulatory decisions. It can't replace our understanding, our expertise, our accountability, relationship building that we need in business, and our strategic thinking. So it does boost our efficiency. And if you try and think about AI and how it can free you up from doing administrative tasks so that you can spend that time on more strategic tasks. It's really interesting to think about how it can impact your day. So there are tools out there to use, and I just thought I'd share some that are out there. So a lot of people use Copilot because that's part of Microsoft. There's Claude and ChatGPT we've mostly heard of. Gemini links with Google. Google, I've put Notebook down there because it has this function where you can record a meeting and it can play it back to you as a podcast that you can listen to later on, which just is incredible. I also just thought I'd share Gamma and Beautiful AI are really good for creating slides. ChatGPT is terrible at slides. I also wanted to share, so if your company is big and it has Cortellis, this one of these big databases, then they've recently launched a regulatory assistant which can help. It's a bit like a chat GPT for regulatory work. And there's also RegChat, which is powered by Kenosha. And this is a purpose-built system for regulatory. It does focus on clinical, but it's been really helpful for us, and it covers the major agencies. So I just wanted to show you a bit of what it looks like. So it looks a bit like ChatGPT, but if you can see here on the left side, you can select different agencies or ICH or clinicaltrials.gov, and you can put in a question and it compare the requirements across different agencies. So it's quite useful for that. I just want to talk about the art of prompts. So prompts is the question that you put into your AI. And so the quality of your prompt is going to help you with getting a quality response. So the better the prompts, the more information you give, the clearer and the more details that you put in, the better the output that you get from your AI. So I've put in a formula here for thinking about, tell it to act as an expert, tell it to act as a regulatory intelligence expert, and put in the task of what the information that you want out of it and what you're doing and how you want the output to look. And you'll get a much better output. But you must use AI with caution. As you can see here, I've created this with the AI and it couldn't even spell caution, and it's mixed up the words properly, but it has amazing qualities, but it can pose risks. So you've got to be aware that there are bias in AI. So it's trained on data, and if that data is particularly biased, then the output will have some bias. So Amazon was using a tool to recruit, and they realized they were getting a lot of male CVs identified to look at rather than female, and they realized that the whole system was trained on women's CVs and not men's. So it was trained on a bias. There are hallucinations. So what this means is it can sound really confident that it knows what it's talking about, but it might have made up the information, or it might have found incorrect information. So you've got to challenge it and be aware that it's not always correct. And then you've also got to be aware of data privacy and security if you're using public AI sources. You've got to make sure that you don't put any GDPR information into there, because you can leak confidential information. There's an example of Samsung where some team members had a meeting and then they put all their notes into a public AI tool, and it could have caused a really big IP leak. So they changed all of their systems so that people weren't allowed to use public AI in the company anymore. So always validate the AI output. Be critical of the output that you get. Do check the sources, and our human oversight is essential. So when you're using AI in regulatory intelligence, use AI as a research tool so you can get answers to questions quickly, and it can help you make decisions, but not make the decisions for you. You still have to make those decisions. It can also help bring up relevant examples or information that you didn't even know about if you're asking it to do a task. So it can help bring up further information. So when I talk about InfoDesk, so when I talked about RegChat earlier, that's more like a ChatGPT tool. InfoDesk is one of these big database platforms that can do the regulatory intelligence job for you. And so lots of large pharma companies use InfoDesk because they scan approved and credible sources. So they're not just scanning the whole web, and they can provide more accuracy and relevance. So the benefits of AI enhanced regulatory intelligence. So when you're using AI with regulatory intelligence, you get speed and scale. It can monitor vast intelligence sources. It can reduce the noise and prioritize critical updates. It can provide really clear summaries of complex documents with hyperlinks, and it can even draft impact assessments if that's what you ask it to do. So when I'm talking about InfoDesk databases, they can route these updates to relevant owners if they're programmed that way, and even can suggest immediate next steps. It can provide a first draft efficiency, so you can use AI to generate initial drafts for SOPs and training based on the information that it's found. And it can also provide consistency because you can standardize the output that you're getting, and it can go into your standard regulatory intelligence tracking. So it really helps regulatory to move from being reactive to proactive. So it impacts your strategic capability. So previously, you may respond to changes when you are aware of them, and then you'd have more time pressure to deal with those changes. Whereas when you have AI enhanced regulatory intelligence, you get notified of these changes immediately, and that means that you have more time to prepare those strategies. And then actually you can focus more on strategy just in general because you've freed up. So this is how this AI-enabled regulatory intelligence can provide this competitive advantage. It means that leadership teams can will then see the importance of regulatory intelligence and can prioritize it. And regulatory experts then have more time for focusing on strategy, for relationship building, for decision making. It also provides some proactive intelligence so you can maintain compliance and reputation with the health authorities. So really this advantage helps provide this speed from when the change happens to when the time that you have to then take that action. And regulators are leveraging AI, so we've got to keep up with them, and we've got to be using it as well. And so AI-powered regulatory intelligence really then becomes a competitive necessity. So, sorry, there's been a lot to get through there, but I wanted to really share some of the important points so you really understood how important regulatory intelligence is and how it can really be enhanced by AI. So what I want to say to you is start experimenting with AI, build your AI skills and share any knowledge with colleagues, and also promote this importance of regulatory intelligence and how it can really provide your organisation with competitive advantage. So I have another question for you. Now that we've been through my presentation to you, what is the biggest opportunity AI enhanced regulatory intelligence can now bring to your organisation? I'll just hide the QR code so we can see it all now. Faster monitoring, yes. Oh, here we go. Clearer guideline summaries. I'll just put the QR code back just in case. Fewer surprises. Clearer guideline summaries. Yeah. So we've got a lot there for the faster monitoring. So it really does provide, instant information, which is incredibly useful. Okay, so I'll move on, but yeah, it's really interesting to see your responses. So thank you for that. So thank you very much for listening. do ask any questions if you have any. Are there any questions in the Q&A, Claire?
Hi, Natasha. We just had one about the costs around Reg Chat, which I have to say I'm not sure off the top of my head, but we can look up and get back to Nicola with that.
They
I
do.
know there's the
there's a 30-day free trial. I think it was.
yeah.
I remember seeing it in dollars, so I think it was about $50, but so it might be about £20 or £30 a month, something like that. But that will be different depending on organisation size as well. I think that was just individual.
Yeah, and just to say that I think there is a link to that in your slides, which we'll send out to everybody over the next few days. You'll have the information there and where to go and look it up.
Yeah. Okay.